We are hopeless, selfish creatures, and we need a savior.
She was a total heathen.
All right, we're doing a podcast.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the podcast, an Exmo
And an Evermo.
Walk into a Bar. I'm Kate, this is my co-host Erika, and we are recording from The Break, which is a great sports grill and bar here in Daybreak, Utah.
We love it. Lots of great food, great drink, and we love recording here.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. So for today's episode, Erika, we are going to be talking about women in the Mormon Church.
I'm so excited.
I know this is a really important topic for you.
Yeah. It's. I know that we have talked about it a lot. It's something that's near and dear to both of us, as we are both women and we have very different experiences. You, as an ex-Mormon, have experiences, with the church itself. I, as a never Mormon, have experiences having moved here and then worked in Mormon Central in Utah Valley, and just being really surprised by some of the ideology that I had never encountered before. And we live in a patriarchy, so I've experienced sexism and misogyny. Sure. This was other level. It was just a whole different ball of wax that I was not used to or ready for.
Yeah. So what were some of your experiences like there? I know you're excited to talk about this.
Well, there was, I guess what I would say, the first one that really comes to mind is, well, first of all, let's go first to the ideology of the church, which I knew a little bit about at the time, that in general, the church does not believe that women are capable of holding positions of leadership or power.
That's not
within
true.
The church.
There are women leaders within the church.
Okay.
However, the ratio of men with leadership to women is ridiculously outbalanced.
There's no top level. Like you could say, so, for instance, there are different tiers of sort of power or leadership in the church, with the prophet being the leader. And then beneath, and I don't know all of this, so you can correct me. I'm speaking a little bit out of my butt because I don't know everything about it. But there's the prophet, and then there's the 12, and then there's the Quorum, which the 12 are sort of a part of. The
Quorum of the 12, and then they have Quorum of the 70, and like area authorities, and they are all men.
And then there's bishops, which is like a priest, I guess, somewhere
for a local congregation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then there is leadership within the home. There's something called the priesthood that someone can hold in the home, and none of those are positions that women can hold as leaders. And women are not even allowed the priesthood in their own homes. And at the time, you asked me one of my experiences there. I was talking to one of the women that I worked with, and I mentioned something about women not really having leadership in the church. And she said, no. That is a common misconception. They absolutely can hold positions of leadership. And at the time, I didn't know to ask her, okay, can they be prophets? Can they be in the quorum? Can they hold the priesthood in their own home? I just kind of said, oh, okay, but then later learned that all of these positions of leadership are not accessible to women. So the only real positions of leadership are in the children's ward, right? And as part of the auxiliary.
In the auxiliary, we can be over the women in the ward, the young women in the ward, and the children, and it's limited to that. So women can have leadership roles among women and children and youth, but not men. But men can have leadership over all of those things. And women.
Right, because women could never have any sort of leadership or power or say or decision-making capability over a man, and they need to...
No, they couldn't. They couldn't. Although I do remember being in the church, like when I was a young single adult going to a singles congregation, we talk about how we wanted to hold the priesthood, like we wanted to, have physical affection with the priesthood. That's how we could hold the priesthood. You don't think that's funny? Or maybe you do. We thought it was a great joke.
No, it's just like we've had so many conversations, and a lot of the things I know after living here, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I know this now, and then every once in a while you say something, and I'm like, what? Like, it's just like things are still shocking to me, and they shouldn't be. Like, I should be ready to hear anything, but that like idea that that you want to like snuggle up with the priesthood.
Yeah, that's how we hold the priesthood.
Without having any access to the actual, so it'd be like, I guess, sort of like aspiring to be first lady. I really want to be married to the president, but never holding that leadership or that power for yourself, which completely disenfranchises women and women who want to do that. Like, there are plenty of women who that's not for, and men. I think there's differences for everybody.
It's a personality thing,
exactly,
more than it is a gender thing.
And it's totally fine to not want to hold a position of leadership, or to want to hold a traditional role that a woman holds, being a homemaker. That's a perfectly lovely and wonderful choice that I don't think is celebrated enough. But the fact is that if you are a woman who has a voice, or who wants to use her voice, or wants to use her leadership and her capabilities to do things in the world, she's told that she really can't as an LDS woman overall.
We know that in today's society, like you said, is a patriarchal society, and so it's not common for women anywhere to have roles of leadership. It's not common.
It's much less common.
Better.
Yeah,
it's getting better, but
now, and I would say, like, back in the day, in the 1940s or 50s or before that, you could say the men at that point, there were some women leaders. There were definitely some, but for the most part, that was really quashed. And even when a woman did make contributions, a lot of times she had to do it under a pen name. So at that time, you could say, as a man, or as anyone in society, women they're not really good at the leadership thing. They're not really good at science. They're not really good at writing, art, anything that men are supposed to, be in charge of. But now we have so many examples of women in leadership. Certainly there are way fewer than men, but we have those examples. So to still cling to that and say, women aren't really capable of this is a little bit bananas to me.
Yeah. The reason I think that this is so prevalent in the LDS church is because it comes from the doctrine. And they throw you little crumbs thinking, oh, look, we're so good at women empowerment. So as a member of the church, I was always taught that there was a heavenly mother, which I think the church thinks is unique. I don't know enough about other religions to know if they believe in a heavenly mother, but the Mormon church does.
Yeah, and I would say, actually, to the church's credit, I grew up Episcopalian. I'm not anymore, but there isn't the emphasis on, there is no heavenly mother. There's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And then Mary is kind of wonderful because she was a virgin and got knocked up by God. And that's celebrated more, I think, like within the Catholic Church. But for Episcopalians, there isn't that sort of woman figure in any sort of, as any kind of centerpiece for Episcopalians. So I think that is like, and the church, it should be celebrated for that. That is an interesting facet.
I think so too. However, the way they treat Heavenly Mother is not okay. For example, we don't ever really have talks about Heavenly Mother. It's just kind of like that ethereal doctrine that we kind of know, but we never talk about, we never address. In fact, like the only place and time I remember hearing Heavenly Mother talked about or sung about in church is from a song called "Oh My Father."
Which is so perfect. The only time you can mention this woman is if she is subsumed by a song titled after a man.
Yeah,
which is so perfect.
It was a poem written by an early member of the church. Eliza R. Snow was her name, and she wrote this poem called "Oh My Father." In the text of this poem, or in this hymn that we sung, it would say, are parents single in heaven? No, the thought makes reason stare, because this reason tells me that I have a mother there. That's the only reference to Heavenly Mother is in this song. So, ironically, on Mother's Day, I was like the ward choir director and the chorister, and I was always taught that we would sing "Oh My Father" on Mother's Day.
And what did you think of that at the time? Were you like, oh, sweet, we have, like, there's this song about the woman? Or did your head ever go like, this is messed up? Like, it's Mother's Day. Can you imagine on Father's Day, like, going in and being like, women and mothers and, like, and all, like, dads too, whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
In my mind, it was just, well, yay, at least we're recognizing Heavenly Mother.
at least a woman gets a reference at all.
However, they don't like to talk about it. So in the church, they have these gospel topics essays. And a lot of members of the church like to stay away from them because they are apologist views on very controversial issues. Like a lot of the things that are talked about in the CES letter, you know, but one of those topics is Heavenly Mother, and they talk about how she does exist. She is there, but, you know, God just hasn't revealed enough about her. And I always grew up hearing that we didn't talk about her because she was too sacred. She was too sacred to talk about. Like, God's not too sacred. Jesus is not too sacred. The Holy Ghost is not too sacred. But Heavenly Mother, let's just not talk about her or give her any credit.
Which is bananas, because the whole point of being sacred, especially within a church, is to talk about the thing that is sacred. That the whole idea of a temple or a church is you go somewhere and that is the sacred place. You do the sacred things. You have the sacred ceremonies.
They don't talk about her in the temple.
I'm gonna call bullshit on that.
Yeah.
And there's something else that you told me that I want to make sure that we mention, and it was specifically about the reason that the men. And you can speak to this a little bit better than I can. When asked about it, the men said, "Oh, we haven't had any revelations to talk about her, right?" Or something like that. Is that
they
how
just
it went?
haven't had any revelation to talk about her. So let's just out of sight, out of mind.
Which is like perfect, because if you think about the rest of the world and how it functions, the phrase is we live in a man's world. No one ever says we live in a woman's world. And you can see that over and over again. Like, men in our patriarchy who typically have had positions in science or whatever, like we've just talked about, in leadership, there is a dearth of research into women's health, which is why, actually, you may or may not know this, back in the day when they were creating stents, which are these things that you put in your heart if you have heart issues, it kind of, you know, expands the blood vessels. I think I'm getting that right. But they only did the research on men, so they were like exploding women's hearts because they made them to fit men, and they put them in women, and they killed a bunch of women with these stents because the men didn't. They wouldn't say have revelations, but it's the same sort of idea. Like, even in
Just
our
cater
society,
to the men.
yeah, we just think about men. Same thing with like seatbelts; they were made for men, so like women wasn't hitting them in the right place. So some women died. You probably have had the experience with like X-rays. I could go on and on. But anyway, men don't typically consider women because, and that may be true of anybody. You're more likely to consider the group that you're a part of. But for the men to look at the women and say, oh, well, we just hadn't had any revelations to talk about women. Well, surprise, surprise, because you're a group of men and you just don't think of women.
Yeah, and when I think about Heavenly Mother specifically, since leaving the church, like, logic falls into place, and I think about things that I never gave myself permission to think of before. But if polygamy, which we talked about in another episode, if polygamy is an eternal principle, don't you think we would be talking about Heavenly Mothers, plural?
That is a really good point.
We never did.
Why doesn't God have multiple wives if he wants everyone else to have multiple wives?
Yeah.
Ooh.
That occurred to me not too long ago, thinking, yeah, polygamy is a bunch of bullshit.
Well, and polygamy in and of itself also is, I mean, another super patriarchal, because it's not, you know, polyamory, which people may or may not be familiar with. Most people probably are.
Which is consensual.
And it's for everybody. So everyone can have, it's sort of equal opportunity screwing around. But with polygamy, I mean, how it started, and we talked a little bit about this, or maybe we didn't even touch specifically on this, but Joseph Smith, who had the revelation to start with polygamy from God, because God told him he needed to be banging multiple women. What happened that I've learned recently is he was banging his 16-year-old maid in the barn, and his wife, Emma, caught him and said, what the fuck are you doing? And he said, God told me I needed to bang our maid, actually. God gave me this revelation. So the whole, polygamy is so rooted, obviously, in misogyny and sexism and men's needs, and definitely not any consideration of women. So the whole, the basis for the start of the religion is misogyny and sexism and using women, basically.
Yeah. And it goes back to the Bible. We're going to talk about Eve now.
Okay.
Mother Eve, who is the mother of all living, is what we were taught. And so thinking about this story of Eve, I actually really loved the way the church portrayed Eve, because I know in other religions they say, oh, she was this horrible, awful person that like fell prey to temptation, and a lot of other people like to vilify her. Mm-hmm. In the Mormon church, we would go to the temple where we would watch the creation of the world on a video, and then they would bring in Eve. And I loved the way that when Satan came to her with the fruit, they had a conversation, and he said, you know what? There's no other way for you to do this. This is a commandment from God, and in order for you to fulfill the commandment, you need to take the fruit. And Eve like really wrestled with it, and she said, really, is there no other way? She made an informed decision. And so I always like looked up to Eve thinking, wow, what a badass, because although I didn't say badass at that time, but I looked at her and thought, that's awesome that she made this decision. It was informed consent.
Interesting.
However, in Genesis, God punishes Eve by greatly multiplying her sorrow in conception. So the reason that we have labor pains is because Eve did what God wanted her to do. He punished her,
right, which
for
makes
obeying the commandment,
which would make God a pretty shitty being to say, you need to do this thing, and now that you've done it, I'm going to punish you. I'll take a little diversion for a minute. Yeah. I think the story of Genesis is actually super interesting, and I think when you look at and this may be just my own interpretation, it is my own interpretation, but it's sort of interesting that maybe the people who read it did have some insights, and I think there are some insights, in any religious text. But if you think about it, they eat from the tree of knowledge, and then there is they're expelled from this sort of Shangri-La into the actual world, and Eve experiences pain and labor, like you say. My interpretation of that is actually that. If you think about our evolution from the animal kingdom into, we're animals, but at some point we developed these giant brains and separated ourselves from the animal kingdom in some regard, in that we build houses and sit in bars and do that kind of thing. But that was, if you think about that, that is when we got knowledge, when we became conscious beings rather than, like a squirrel or a goldfish or whatever. And the result of that is it's actually our giant craniums that one, give us the knowledge, and two, cause painful labor. And I'm wondering if they ever made that connection. That's sort of how I interpret that story. It was our evolution going from unconscious sort of animals running around, not knowing that. My dog at home does not know that she's going to die. She doesn't have to deal with that. She just, she's happy. She eats her dog food. She runs around. She chases balls in the park, and that's her life, and she never goes, oh shit, one day I'm not going to be here. Yeah. And I think like that is actually, that story is an analogy, and I totally digressed, but I think like Genesis is an interesting story to me. And Eve is interesting actually, if you think about it, that she is the person sort of leading the charge out of the Garden of Eden and saying, hey, let's go get smart, which also leads to a lot of our misery. Yeah. But anyway, I digress.
But interestingly, in the temple video, I went through the temple for the first time before my mission in the late 90s, and it has changed since. But at the time, in this video, they go through the creation of the world, they go through this whole Adam and Eve thing with the Satan partaking the fruit, and then they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden into the lone and spacious world or whatever. Anyhow, as soon as they leave the Garden of Eden, you never hear Eve say another word. The second half of the video, she doesn't say anything. And so Adam gets visited by Peter, James, and John, and he gets to speak with Jehovah, who is Jesus of the Old Testament, he gets to do all of the conversing, but Eve is silent from the second half of the video. They've changed it since. In the last couple of years, I think they got some pushback from some people, which the church often does, and so they made it more welcoming. So Eve, we're going to give her a few more lines here because
we have to, basically, because
yeah, I just hit that.
because we have to, because women in the church are standing up, which is also really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
So now, because of this podcast and because of my relationship with you, I'm on all these sort of ex-Mormon groups, and then they post things from some of the Mormon groups. And one of them was, I don't know who she is, it's a woman, she's part of the church, and she's speaking like this and telling all the women, do this for blessings in the church, whatever. It's made I couldn't listen to it for very long because it made my skin crawl.
I grew up listening to those voices.
It is so saccharine and so yucky. This woman, posted this video from the church telling the women to just stick to their doctrine and hold to the truth and something very saccharine. But the reason it was posted on this ex-Mormon page was because the women came out in droves, and they seemed legitimate, because a lot of them were saying, I am a devout member of the church, please give us a voice. They were all just begging, comment after comment after comment. It was kind of remarkable, and I commented sort of like a little sassily, underneath one of them. I said, well, imagine like them letting a woman be a prophet. I was like, I know that will never happen. And I kind of expected to get the smackdown from these women, like, well, you can't expect that. But I got a bunch of likes from these women who are part of the church. So there is, for some women, there is the recognition that there is this inequality and inequity there. And I do hope that changes, because it is so damaging. And I'll say one more really quick thing.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
It translates. So, like, you asked me about my experiences where I was working in Mormon Central. We made a video one day. I was working at a university, and we asked in the video, it was for, I think it was for Women's History Month, probably last year. We asked the students, what can you tell us about a woman that you look up to? Not a single person, not one student could name a woman that they looked up to outside of their mother. And it's great to look up to your mother. I would never say my mom if someone asked me, what during Women's History Month, what woman leader I looked up to. And my guess is, I cannot say for sure, my guess is they probably couldn't name one. And that's because they haven't, and I just wrote a quick list, and this is how it translates, because they don't know who women leaders are. They don't know who to even reference, except for the woman who baked them cookies, which is really lovely. But to not understand anything about women and leadership, and I just jotted down Shirley Chisholm, Hillary Clinton, Rosa Parks, Wilma Mankiller, Harriet Tubman, Gloria Steinem, AOC, Dorothy Pittman Hughes, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Like, that's just like off the top of my head.
But they're so woke, Erika. They're all just so woke.
Well, you'd have to be a woman in leadership, or to acknowledge that women are capable of
Right.
leadership. But that's really sad to me, that the doctrine, and that translates to these students who are at a university, who should be able to say someone other than their mother that they look up to as a role model.
You ready for a quote from Elaine Dalton, who was
I wrote this one down too. But yes, please do it.
She was the Young Women's president. This is in the year 2013. She says, young women, you'll be the ones who will provide the example of virtuous womanhood and motherhood. You will understand your roles and responsibilities, and thus will see no need to lobby for rights.
And this is 2013, you said?
This is 2013.
And what was her role?
I believe she was the Young Women's president at the time.
No need to lobby for your rights. And I just how do you look at someone and say, you don't deserve rights? Mm-hmm. And if you think you do, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. There's something wrong with you. And then how do you, on the other side of that, go, yeah, I don't deserve any rights. I shouldn't fight for my rights. I don't deserve any. I should be humble and quiet.
Because that's what they teach you. They teach you that from your earliest age, that you just keep sweet, pray and obey. And having been in the Young Women organization, this is for girls aged 12 to 18, and you have your classes on Sundays with the Young Women, but you also have activities each week. And I was Young Women's president twice, so I was over the girls in my neighborhood. In the theme that they speak, like they have a theme that every Sunday they would get up and say, "We are daughters of our Heavenly Father who loves us, and we love Him. We will stand." And I could quote this verbatim.
No, please do.
Oh, let's try this. Okay, I'll say this. All right, I'll say the whole thing. We are daughters of our Heavenly Father who love us, and we love Him. We will stand as witnesses of God at all times and in all things and in all places. As we stand as, oh, damn it.
Yay, you're forgetting some. The brainwashing is going away.
Hallelujah. As we strive to live the Young Women values, which are faith, divine nature, individual worth, knowledge, choice and accountability, good works, integrity, and then they added virtue when I was Young Women's president. We believe as we come to accept and act upon these values, we will be prepared to strengthen home and family, make and keep sacred covenants, and ensure the blessings of exaltation. Was the Young Women's theme we said every week. Did you notice at the beginning I said, we are daughters of our Heavenly Father?
No mother.
No mother. However, in 2019, I was Young Women's president again, and they changed it to include Heavenly Parents, plural.
Oh, well,
So
that's a step.
That's progress.
That's great. And I think, like, give credit where credit is due. That is progress. I'm curious about a couple of things. I have some questions for you. So I want to know, and you probably don't have this memorized because it wouldn't have been for you, but I'm curious what was the men's? So, like, did men have a similar, like, did they have to be virtuous? Like, do they,
no.
like, are they supposed to be strong leaders, thinkers? Like, do you know anything about
I don't
what their
know
things?
the Young Men's theme because I didn't have to recite it every week, and you could see I was already forgetting this thing that I was chanting every week for my whole life. But the Young Men, when they came out with the new Young Men's theme in 2019, they talk about Heavenly Parents for the girls, but it's only God for the men, only God the Father for the men. They didn't talk about Heavenly Parents. We did make that observation in the church, and it bothered me, but put on the shelf.
Which is also bananas. And I have another question for you, but I also want to say, and this sort of leads into the question. So again, I've only been living here in Mormon Central adjacent for a little over 3 years. I've heard from several women, and one of them was one of my neighbors, lovely, wonderful person. And every time we're friends on Facebook, and we would talk in person too. She's moved away now, but when we talked in person, and then whenever I would post something on Facebook that was remotely feminist in nature, which is often, she would message me. I know, so surprising. Everyone's shocked. But she would get back to me and just sometimes write these really long statements, and we'd talk for hours, and she would just tell me how devalued she was by the church. She is really struggling to find self-worth because the church tells you, and we'll do a quote from Brigham Young. This is how much I love that guy. You could saw my face. But the church teaches women that their value is, one, in your virginity, which isn't even like a real thing. Virginity is basically a construct. And also, like, there's what value is that? Like, I never derived my value from my virginity. It's a bizarre thing to put on somebody. And then from the number of children you can have. And both of those things, I will say, are in service to everything that the church is in service to. And it's not love, it's not caring, it's not empathy, it's not treating people well, it's not even Jesus. It is that almighty 10%. And the way that works is, one, your virginity. If you want to lose your virginity correctly, you do it within the confines of holy marriage after being sealed in the temple with someone who is also part of the church, both tithed, and it also further entrenches you into the church because you get married when you're 18, 19, 20. And then after that, your value is and how many babies you can spit out.
Yeah.
So, which is also in service to that 10%, because those kids tithe as soon as they have allowances, then they march out into the world, they get other people to bring in, everything is in service to that 10%. So my other question for you is, so I know we have talked a lot, and I know you as a smart, thinking, creative leader, articulate person.
Thank you.
You have so much going on in you, like you can't, you want to be doing other things. You have a voice. You have an awesome voice. You have a powerful voice. I love our conversations. I love everything that you're doing on your TikTok, Midlife Exmo. What, like in the church, it must have been at odds with you, who's like, I want to do things and say things. And the church was telling you, no, 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 no. Your value is between your legs before you have sex. And after you have sex, it's what comes out of between your legs. And that's it. Like, how did that land for you as a thinking, human, creative, brilliant person?
Well, first of all, is they told me that I was none of those things. I didn't think I was smart. I was an idiot. I was in the remedial classes when I was in school because I had ADHD, and they thought that I was just a moron.
And our education system is not great.
Well, and yeah, we could have a whole conversation about that. But my self-esteem was so deplorably low, my whole life. I didn't think I was smart. I didn't think I was creative. I didn't think I was pretty. I didn't think I was ever going to get married. There was a time when I was 17 years old when I went to go get my patriarchal blessing, which is kind of like getting your fortune told to you, is really what it is. And so you go to a man who is set apart as the patriarch in the ward. I was 17, and he pulled me aside before this blessing. He was going to tell me all of these things, and he said, what kinds of things are on your mind? What would you like to hear the Lord speak to you? And I said in tears, I don't think I'm ever going to get married. I don't think anyone will ever love me enough because I'm that fundamentally broken. I don't think I'm ever going to be worthy of love because that was instilled in me from such an early age that I didn't have value and I didn't have a voice. And I'm very fortunate that I was able to outgrow that thinking. But of course, the patriarchal blessing did say, like, if you're worthy, you're going to have a husband in your future. Like, be worthy of this person to come into your life. So do X, Y, Z, bow your head and say yes, keep sweet, pray, and obey. And then the Lord will reward you with this thing. But I never thought about sex because I didn't think I was ever going to have sex.
Which is also bananas, and we'll do a whole episode about all of the insanity around what the church teaches about sex and how, oh man, how it affects people and really messes them up, and what I saw in real time. But I think that is such a travesty and a tragedy because you have so much to offer and you're offering it now. Like, you are using your voice, and I'm going to get choked up because it's so awesome to see. And like, I've seen your journey from, a person who was in the church and looked really downtrodden to this like thriving. And I know it's a roller coaster for you, and there are good times and bad times, but it's tragic to me that there are so many women that are probably a part of the church and silenced and not allowed to do other things, and that's outside of the home. And that's something that I see as well, in the social media groups. I see lots of posts from ex-Mormon women trying to figure out their place in the world now, and a lot of them say, I was told I was just supposed to be in the home, and I'm getting divorced now. My children are grown.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with myself, and that's tragic to me. And I'm glad that you found your way out of that.
Thank
and
you.
I'm wondering, like, how do you feel now that you can like exercise all of that and say the things and do the things and be the things? Like, how does that feel?
I think I've mentioned this to you before. It's like Rapunzel in the movie Tangled, where I don't think you've seen yet, but you'll need to watch
but I
this
love this
scene
analogy. It's
where
so great.
Rapunzel has been trapped in this tower for her whole life, and then Flynn Rider rescues her, and they're traveling the world. And then in the first, there's a montage where she's just so excited. She's like, "This is the best day ever!" And the next minute she's like, "What am I doing? I'm a worthless daughter. Oh my gosh, this is amazing! My mother's gonna be so disappointed." That's kind of what it's like leaving the LDS Church. Like, you do have all of this excitement. You have this desire to just lean into your authenticity, to learn who you are, to become more of who you're meant to become. And at the same time, you're like, what the hell am I doing? I'm disappointing these people that loved me my whole life, you know?
Right. Well,
it's hard.
Yeah, and I that is something that I see a lot as well in social media groups where people are talking about their faith deconstruction, because you've been told your whole life, this is where your value is. This is what you should be doing. And when you pull away from that, it's so ingrained, because intentionally that is what a cult does, is ingrain these ideas in you that make it really difficult to leave, that make you feel bad about yourself when you're doing that. And not only that, you still have so many people that are still a part of it. So in reality, you have escaped a cult, which is bonkers. That is a crazy experience. It is a very large cult, but it is a cult. And that, you know, if you watch any of the, you know, the smaller cults, like with the people who, I think I watched the whole thing about Warren Jeffs, is that his name? Did I say it right? Yeah. You know, and the women who broke away from that had sort of bananas experiences when they left, because they were told they were doing the wrong thing, and they were breaking their families' hearts. And all of those people are sort of deployed to also make you feel that way. So you're having this like tumbling out of the tower feeling, because all of these people are basically doing the bidding of the church, which is by design and meant to keep people in the church, because that's how they make money. And it's all about the money. It's all about the money.
And the power. And
the power, yes. And they need to keep people in the church for that. So that's a bummer, but I'm glad that you continue to deconstruct and move forward and use your voice and like bloom into this person. And mostly I see you blooming. Sometimes I see you like, I see the emotions, but mostly I just see you thriving and blooming and becoming the creative, brilliant person. Not becoming, allowing yourself to be, because you've always been that person.
Thank you. And I think that's a good time to talk to our audience right now. If you are a woman listening to this podcast or watching it right now, you need to understand that you are worthy just as you are. Just for existing, you are worthy. You don't need anyone to tell you differently, because you are a unique human being. You have talents, you have gifts, you have so much to offer this world. And it's the patriarchy that tries to keep you silent. I mean, we just had the Super Bowl, and Taylor Swift, people were coming after her for just existing.
Right. And if you notice, I mean, so she got booed at the Super Bowl. We're obviously recording this right after that in 2025. She got booed at the Super Bowl because people are pissed off that this woman is showing up and taking, maybe 8 seconds, probably less, of time on a board. And they need to screw her to the wall for that.
How dare you come and support your boyfriend?
How dare you show up and be seen? And why are people even looking at you when she is the most successful pop star maybe ever?
She's amazing.
And at least today. But then he can go to her games, or her concerts, and he gets cheered. Yay, good boyfriend. But she's not a good girlfriend for showing up for her boyfriend, which is bananas. And go to any of the comments on any of that. So patriarchy for sure is not just in the Mormon church. I think in the world it's kind of like this, and in the Mormon church it's kind of like this.
Yeah.
But yes, it exists all around us. And again, we're not speaking out necessarily against Mormonism. We're not anti-Mormon. No. We're anti being devalued, being lied to,
Oppression.
taken advantage of, abused, manipulated out of your money, coerced. We are pro-critical thinking, pro-empowerment, pro-women, pro-equality, pro-men.
Yeah.
And
pro-humanity.
Pro-humanity. And yeah, so, but we, as two women, that is our lens. You as a woman who was in the church, and me as someone who was surrounded by it. And I do want to go back to, if it's okay.
Yeah.
And then we can do some of the quotes too, I think, because the quotes are
Love
bananas.
it.
You guys are going to love it. So at the university where I was working, I saw a lot of this in action, as I mentioned already, with the students who couldn't name a single female role model outside of their mother. But another totally bananas experience, we had leadership. And I'm putting this in quotes because it was far from any sort of leadership seminar you would get anywhere else. But it was a leadership seminar for some of the people who had like director, level positions and whatnot. It was all about supposedly leadership. First, they went through and they listed lots of leaders. And this is probably why the students could not list any female leaders. There was not one single female leader listed as they were going through. It was like a 3-day seminar. And every day I was like going through my notes. I was like, they didn't mention one woman. I don't think they mentioned any people of color. They maybe mentioned MLK. It was a few years ago, so I'm a little bit fuzzy. They maybe mentioned MLK, but I'm not even sure about that. And I did say something at the end of it. I said, they asked for feedback on the very last day, and I stood up and I said, you mentioned a bunch of leaders. You didn't mention any people of color, and you didn't mention any female leaders in the 3 days of this seminar. I said, look around. There were no people of color in the room because it was Utah County. But I said, this room is more than half women. You didn't mention a single woman leader to a leadership seminar filled with at least half women leaders. And one of the women, we had like a debriefing after, and she was part of the seminar. She was one of the people speaking, and she said, well, I don't really understand that comment because I am a woman and I'm in leadership. And I was like, well, then you probably should have thought of a woman to mention in this seminar. And I think that's what I said to her. So that was totally bananas. And then one separate part of this, as part of this seminar, and I will also say, I was working at a university, it was not BYU. And not is the most important part of this sentence, because they showed a video. They were giving us examples of good leadership, and they said, this is a really great example of leadership, guys. Watch this. So we all watched. It's this Christian video this is not a Christian school. It's not BYU. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why we're watching this video, which would be inappropriate pretty much anywhere else. But it was, and everyone in the room had seen it except for me, and I was like, what is happening right now? The idea of leadership that they had, it was from this Christian movie, and this guy, it was on a football field, of course, and the coach was like, I need you to do this thing, whatever. And this guy gets down, and he has to crawl. I think there's a man sitting on him or a weight or something, and he's crawling down the field, and the coach is yelling at him, you keep going, and he's ready to drop. He's like, I don't want you to quit. You keep going. You've got to do that. And he's screaming at him, and I was like, I would get fired.
This was positive leadership?
Yeah, this is what we should strive to do. You push
Get in
people, you
someone's
ride them.
face.
Yeah, you get in people's face, you yell at them, you ride them. Very masculine, very patriarchal, very 1950s.
Yikes.
It was bananas. And to the people in the classes, in the seminar's credit, everyone was kind of like, dude, what? It was a guy who was showing this, who was leading this part of the seminar. But it was bananas. And one of those days, you asked me, what have your experiences been here? I was literally I am learning in reverse. I'm unlearning.
Yeah.
This is the worst leadership seminar or ideology of leadership I have ever heard in my life. Plus, it's whatever it was, 2023, 2024.
Oh my God.
Not 1960. This is a thing I would expect to see back in the day.
We still see today.
Yeah.
Because people are lacking in empathy. So to talk about this leadership that we're getting from this organization, which I think maybe they do have a little bit more empathy. They don't get in your face and tell you to obey the commandments. They're a little bit more coercive and manipulative than that. But one of the major things that they control is women's bodies with modesty, right? Modest is hottest, is what I was always taught, because you have to wear your temple garments and, cover the shoulders, cover the neckline, cover the torso, and all of the things. You should not wear anything that would allow the garments to show, even if you're a child and you don't have the garments. But Dallin Oaks, who will be the next prophet after Russell Nelson dies, who is the current prophet, he's 100 years old. He's going to die soon. Dallin Oaks, in a talk recently, said that women, when you show these parts of your body, you are becoming pornography.
Clearly, he's never seen pornography.
Right. Because pornography usually takes like 2 people off.
And also like some sex.
Yeah. I don't know. But I mean, I grew up with that mentality that I shouldn't cover even though I didn't think I was pretty, I didn't think I had anything to offer anyone because I was ugly and I was worthless. And one thing or another, still I had to protect my virtue and cover my body and all of these things. And women are great at policing one another.
Well, and
covering up. Yeah, just covering up. I think I mentioned this previously. Like, women will come and fix my clothes. Oh, your garment's sewing, and then they just think it's their right to adjust my clothing so I don't show my garments.
Which is all of it bananas. It's another. It does several things. I mean, it is another mechanism of control. It's another mechanism of saying your value is in this thing that's like actually not valuable. It's not in what you do. It's not in your accomplishments. It's not in what you think. It's not in what you offer. It's in your ability to erase yourself,
to stay pure and erase yourself. That's a great way of putting it.
To be covered. I mean, the extreme of that would be a burqa, where they have completely erased women. You can't tell one from another. You can't even see their face. A burqa goes.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a totally different thing. It's basically like putting a sheet over your body that goes all the way down to your feet. But this is on that spectrum, and I will say. And I've got to do 2 because these 2 are like so fucking bananas. And again, like for me, like, oh, my head just explodes here all the time because I'm like, where the fuck am I? Like, what year am I in? So within this organization where I was working, which was a performing arts organization within a university, so obviously we had these performances, there was one performance where a woman, I'm so glad I wasn't there that night because I'm there for a lot of the performances. A woman was on stage. She was wearing a skirt. So I don't think that you can see my leg on this, but her skirt came up to maybe like 4 inches above her knee. It was slit. There was a man in the audience who pulled an usher aside in the middle of the show and said, can you go tell the conductor that woman's leg is showing? I'll give her my jacket and she can cover up.
Because women are responsible for the thoughts of men.
Right. Well,
women are responsible for their thoughts.
Everything is our fault. It's like that scene from Handmaid's Tale, which you haven't seen yet.
I have seen.
Oh, you've seen the your fault, which is that everything, like if this man's lust or whatever is incited, that's this woman's fault because she is responsible for for his thoughts, basically.
Right.
Which is totally bananas, but also the idea that he thinks that he has the right to police her body in a performance. This is a woman who's playing an instrument on a stage in a professional capacity, using her talent. And this man is like, all I see is your thigh. And I need to control you. I need to be able to tell you what to do.
Not him, because he could have the boundary like, oh, I'm not comfortable and I'm going to leave. I'm going to remove myself from this situation. No. It's let's control someone else.
Exactly. And I was in a meeting about it the next day. We had to do like debriefings after the thing. And I was sitting there listening and I was like, you guys, you are so lucky that I wasn't there because I would have walked up to him and said, here you go. And I would have put a paper bag over his head and said, fix the problem for you because it's your fucking problem. It is not her problem. She wasn't sitting on the stage naked. She just was wearing a regular skirt in the year 2023 or 24, whatever it was. totally bananas and all about control and all about I get to tell you what to do. And if I behave in a way that is bad, I blame you. It's not my fault. I can't be held accountable.
I wonder if he was a member of the church.
Everyone was a member of the church there. I mean, pretty much. There's.
Most of them were, yeah.
I can tell you 100% this was a member of the church. It was a member of the church, for sure. And then there's one other example, very similar, someone that I worked with. This was back in the 80s. Her mother was at a restaurant. And this woman is very, she's very modest herself. She is a part of the church, and she is generally pretty covered up, pretty much to here. So her mother in the 80s certainly was very prim and proper. But she did go out to dinner once with her husband, and I guess like a little bit of her neck was showing. And another man in the restaurant walked up to her and she told this story, put a napkin over her mother's neck. So one, if that were me, my husband would have decked the person. I would have decked the person. And I would have said, get your fucking hands off me. Do not put a napkin on me. You go back to your table right now.
I love you so much.
But she sat there ashamed. She didn't do anything. She just put her head down and finished her meal. And the point was to shame her. Oh, and I'm like getting like, it makes me so angry because the fact that this guy thought that he had the right to publicly humiliate this woman for daring to show a little piece of her neck. Like,
Yeah.
how awful for her. And who the fuck do you think you are?
Can I tell you, and I've told you this story before, but since I would have been the same person in the church. When I was in the church, if someone had humiliated me, it would have been my job to just turn the other cheek, to keep sweet, pray and obey. Recently, I was working with someone, and I made a mistake. It was a misunderstanding about something, and a person that I was working with lost their mind with me and embarrassed me in front of everyone that we were working. There were maybe like 15 people around that all witnessed him just yelling at me. And it wasn't and I made some like dumbass excuse, like, oh, I meant to do this. And I went home and I was so angry. I was so angry that I had been humiliated. And I was like, that man. And the church would have taught me to just sweep it under the rug, forgive. And it's your job to just love him for who he is. I'm not that person anymore.
Yay!
So I went home and I was angry, and I came up with a game plan. And the next day I was going to see this man. I got to where I was, and I pulled him aside before we started what we were doing. And I pulled him aside and I said, you know what you did yesterday was actually really quite humiliating. It was not okay. You embarrassed me in front of everybody here. Is there an issue that we need to talk about? And he said, well, I don't know you well enough to have an opinion either way. I'm like, okay, but what you did hurt. And I just want to clear the air. And he's like, well, that was not my intent. And I apologize. I'm so sorry I did that. And I said, thank you. I really appreciate your apology. I didn't say, oh, no, it's okay, because you don't do that. When you accept an apology, you don't say, oh, it's okay. You say, thank you for the apology. And then we get like a fist bump, and everything was fine. And I just had like fireworks going off in my head because I was like, I can stand up for myself now. And we didn't have to have a fight. We didn't have to argue or anything. We just cleared the air because I was able to say, I am not a worthless piece of shit. I am not a doormat. You do not get to treat me like that.
Good for you. And I love that story. I love it so much. And I love that you were able to do that and know that sometimes there will be a fight. There will be pushback.
Yeah.
And I love the way that you handle that without being like, look, fucker, which is like probably my go-to more than it should be. But I'm learning a lot from you to like be, like, and those things, it does work a lot of the time. When you just break it down for someone and you just say like, this is not okay. Why did this happen? Why did you feel like you needed to treat me like this? And I love that you did that. And I love that you were finding your voice. That is so awesome.
Oh, I feel so good.
That makes me happy.
Yay.
So we need to wrap it up because we're getting close to, I don't have my watch on, but we're getting close to, I think, an hour, and we don't like these to go over an hour, which is a bummer because I think that we may come back to this, or maybe we'll just pepper it into, because I feel like we barely scratched the surface with this, with the way that women are treated.
I
in
think
the
on our
church.
next episode, we're going to dive a little bit deeper.
I'm so excited about that. You guys, you're going to love it. We have a very special guest. But I do want to maybe end with this quote. And this is something that, again, I saw on social media. I spend way too much time on social media. And one of the ex-Mormon groups posted this. It's a quote from Brigham Young, and they posted it as like, oh, what the fuck? And to me, I just thought of the people that I know. I have some friends that are members of the church, and I just thought, well, one, they probably have seen this at some point, and I posted it, so they saw it when I posted it. Unless they've unfollowed me. But it was just like, it's so sort of bananas to me in terms of how people are able to square something like this and go like, yeah, this is the guy that I want to follow. I want to go to the university named after him.
Yeah.
This is my leader, and he's great and wonderful. So this is a quote from Brigham Young, the second prophet
of the church. Mm-hmm.
of the church, and also a complete douchebag.
Yeah, I agree.
He said, the woman is the glory of the man. What is the glory of the woman? It is her virginity until she gives it into the hands of the man that will be her Lord and master to all eternity. What the fuck? Like,
Yeah.
we could do a whole episode just on this quote.
Yeah. I'm grateful more and more each day that I don't belong to this religion any longer. I'm grateful for the chance that you and I have to break it down and to help people think critically for yourself. And I know there are those out there who are going to say, oh, he was speaking as a man, not as a prophet. Bullshit. He was always speaking as a man, a very narcissistic, racist, misogynistic man. And we're hoping to hold this organization accountable the best we can.
Yeah, and that's all that we're doing.
I know it's a very large organization. It's got hundreds of billions of dollars and millions of members, but
we can
do
shine
our
a light
part.
on it, and we can say what we're going to say, and we can share our experiences, and hopefully that resonates with some people and helps them find what you have found, which I think is the ability to thrive and bloom and become the awesome person that you always were, to let yourself be that person. So hopefully that happens for somebody else, and listening to your words, because I know that you listened to people and it helped you
Hell yeah.
to get out, and now you're paying that forward and you're giving that to somebody else.
yeah. We're going to wrap up now. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode or any of the other ones, we invite you to like, to share, to follow, to leave a comment. We would love any kind of engagement from you. Until next time, it's Kate and Erika, and we just like to say cheers. Let's try that again. It's Kate and Erika, and we'd like to say cheers to deconstructing Mormonism.